There we go. How's that?
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I'm trying to figure out, last time when I made the video here, it done something weird and it didn't quite record the way I wanted it to, but it was perfectly perfectly fine. So I think by way of my usual introduction here, by way of my, sorry, Mirren's just joined us, so I think I might need to do the mute thing again, we'll see. So a few years ago when I started into film photography myself, Jay's name kept popping up. I was looking at the photography of other people, and even if it wasn't his photos, his name was popping up because he seemed to be either helping people with their development techniques or actually devising ways of inventing new and exciting developers that people could use for strange and wonderful film. So I started kind of following him around Flickr and Instagram, and then Facebook, and the usual thing where you connect more and more with people as these things progress. And I started to ask him a little bit more about his portraiture and his other works. And I always found this. I found this. Sorry, guys, this thing is doing something very weird for me here. Can you still see me?
Yeah. We see
Sorry, guys. So I started looking at Jay's portraiture, and there's something truly wonderful about it. And this is kind of what I want to talk to him about this evening, amongst other things. So I'm hoping the usual format here, that Jay has some images that he's going to share with us, and maybe we can kind of have a chat around them. I hope I haven't embarrassed you too much with my fanboyism here, Jay, but I'm a fan. What can I do? So you might tell us a little bit about sort of the part of the country you're in there, and maybe does that lead into your photographic outlets, or?
Well, in a negative way. Well, I shouldn't say that, in a specific way. So I'm here in, we've moved to Illinois a few years ago, and most of that time I've been working offshore in Africa, and so I've only been here at most half the time. And so you know how it is when you move to a new town, it takes a while to kind of get to establish a social circle, and we didn't really have time to do any of that before COVID hit. So we're very isolated here, which for our purposes, our present purposes, is useful. But for me, it's been challenging in that my instincts to photograph people are very constrained. So luckily, I have Julia and my family still here with me, and she is extremely patient and cooperative, and truly a partner in all this. And so I'm extremely lucky, because I can imagine a scenario pretty easily where I'd just be starving for, I'd be doing still lifes or something. Nothing against still lifes, but it's just, actually I have done a few when Julia went to Russia for a few weeks. I was here alone, and I went right to the tabletop.
Well, okay. And I mean, do you find that the tabletop stuff, which is, I mean, I've always enjoyed them anyway, but is that kind of going back to sort of the idea, the classics of classical paintings of old, where?
No, it's closer to product photography.
Okay.
It's just there's no art to it. It's just purely technical exercise. See if you can do it, kind of thing. And sometimes you just kind of you need to test a film with a real image, and so my preference is to always use a portrait, but when you don't have anyone, the last line of defense is a self-portrait, which I avoid as much as possible.
Yeah. Is this do you find that the tabletop stuff is allowing you to control lighting better to give you kind of consistent results around this?
Yeah, in some ways, it's very similar to studio portraiture. You know, you have control of the amount and direction and quality and all of the lights, and with the advantage that your subject is perfectly still and absolutely patient. So in that way, it's kind of an indulgence, but you know, like I said, there's no art to it. It's just whatever I find laying around, I throw up and shoot a picture.
I think the generations of people that have kind of found an artistic outlet in still lifes and, you know,
Oh yeah, no, it can be very well done. It's just not by me. I mean, maybe if I felt passionate about it, I would learn to do it. But you know, you get your books on view camera movements and your lighting books that show you how to do tabletop stuff. And for the old commercial photographers who I really admire for their mastery of technique, this was fundamentals. This is basics, and I have a lot of respect for fundamentals and basics.
Okay. In terms of the portraiture, then I would imagine a slightly less controlled environment might be some of this offshore portraiture, which I mean, it is. I know we're all missing traveling, and we're, you know, for somebody like you who traveled a lot for work, and it's probably essential for your work. These offshore portraits that you do of your friends and colleagues,
that was a really fun project. And actually, I've just a week ago or so sent the files off for publishing to make a book of it. So
okay.
For my colleagues, you know, I approached the whole project as kind of a family album, you know.
Yeah.
It's a very, working offshore, I don't know if any of you have ever done that, but North Sea is full of these installations. But it's a very, very encapsulated world, and it is in a lot of ways like being on a ship. I mean, it is essentially a ship. It just doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And so all of the traditions sort of apply, and they emphasize so much than your ability to get along with each other, because you are stuck together 12-hour shifts every day for a month at a time.
I'm quite curious as to that, you know, is there kind of psychological experimentation that you have to do before you ever go offshore, or?
Well, no, it's kind of a trial by fire, and not everyone kind of is suited to it, you know, and it's nothing against them personally. It's a very extreme environment, you know. It's very close to the equator. It's very hot. So for me, the strategy was to just go back to the basics, stay healthy, get plenty of sleep, drink lots of water, get as much exercise as you can. These are all things that sound simple, but they're easy to get away from you offshore. And so just by paying attention to these and staying in time, because everything's very regimented and scheduled there. And if you get out of sync, it's very painful. And I think that more than anything gives you at least a chance at maintaining a positive attitude. And once you have all those things kind of under your belt, then you just enjoy yourself.
And is this one of the reasons and it might be an opportunity to maybe start sharing a couple of these portraits, but is the photography there kind of, it brings an element of normalcy to the
well, it does for me.
It might have been the best idea I ever had. It makes it a bit more normal because it's more in line with what you would be doing in your leisure time at home. Anyway.
That's the other challenge, is to maintain some continuity with the rest of your life, and that was really the inspiration for this project, because part of my job was I had to make my rounds every day and take pictures of the work in progress, and so I ended up, you know, taking a couple pictures of some colleagues and posting them, and people reacted very favorably. And I thought, you know, there's so many great people here, and I should. Okay, so I guess I can start showing these.
Yeah, if you click your screen share there, hopefully.
Okay. All right.
Perfect. Yeah.
So what I did was I just I took my Minolta SRT 101, which is, many of you know, is an old mechanical camera, and the only thing the battery does is operate the light meter. So since I'm in an explosive atmosphere there, I had to take the battery out of the camera to take it into the facility. So I had to do all this without a light meter, which was surprisingly not that difficult. So like I said, it's on the equator, so conditions are pretty stable. So once you kind of figure out what your settings are, then you get very few kind of failed.
And are you dragging people from other bits of the rig here to more favorable light, or are you finding them as?
This gentleman here is a cook, and I was making my rounds, and I saw him out there, and I said, "Oh, hey, could you step over here towards the rail?" And he was very confused. I got a lot of that, but you know, in a very short time, it's a very small world there, and in a very short time, everybody knew me and knew what I was doing, and they were all extremely cooperative. So a few puzzled faces in the beginning, but everybody kind of got used to me. And this is one of my favorites.
It is truly spectacular. It really.
Yeah. And these guys work so hard, and they just they don't get as much credit as they should. And I really thought it was, you know, our lives on offshore center around our meals, and these guys should get more appreciation than they did, I think. And so I wanted to make sure to include them.
And I mean, just from the practical side of it, in terms of the new faces, and I'm kind of thinking of it, you know, there's only so many times that people will tolerate you coming in, unless they're really into having their photo taken. Are you looking at guys kind of rotating in and out on the same shifts as you? Or
sort of, but my kind of sorties were pretty prescribed. You know, I had a couple of chances in a day to make the rounds. Most of the time I was at my desk. And so I would take anybody that I happened across. And so a few times I would have somebody in the office, and we'd step outside and take some pictures very close to the office. And that was nice. But as far as everyone was fair game in my book. And I wanted to focus mainly on the guys who are involved in our project. We were a project group on board, so we weren't the core crew. But very soon, you know, the way when you try to put boundaries around things, you find that they become very porous very quickly. And in a vessel like this, it doesn't make any sense to exclude anyone.
Yes, yeah.
So I just went by the rule of opportunity. Anybody I happened across was fair game. So
it's a beautiful portrait.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I like this one. This guy had a great face, and I'm trying to figure out how I moved to that. There we go. So this is one of the ones that, like I said, that this is the bridge where our office was, and so my desk was right behind this gentleman, Mike, and so he was the OIM, which is captain essentially, offshore installation manager. So when he came up to the bridge, I took the opportunity, and all I did was I'd step out to the door and I'd open the door, and that was my light source. So he was standing inside the door and I was standing outside the door. And I like this one too. He's a great guy. Yeah. Fred was just one of them. All these guys are so hardworking and great guys. And this guy would work hard. I worked long hours, but I didn't work hard. I worked at a desk. This guy worked hard. And at the end of the day, I'd go to the gym to try and get some blood flowing through my veins, and he was in there every day. So eventually he took pity on me and helped me and started helping me with my training. So yeah, it's Fred. He's a good guy.
Hey, working at a desk can be hard, Jay. Trust me, I know. I know. These fingers are worn to a nub from typing, you know.
Right, and then so these are a couple of our project guys. The guy on the left is Reagan Lim, and the guy on the right is the guy on the left is a Singaporean welding supervisor. The guy on the right is Gavin Spowert. Some of you old timers might remember him. He was a professional surfer from South Africa, very very famous in the 70s and 80s, early 80s. I better revise that. 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, great guy. And we had people from all over the world on there, but Singaporeans, South Africans were pretty big contingent.
And they all look very comfortable and very happy having their photos taken. I mean, were you a bit of a novelty act that you were doing this anyway? Like, do you think that kind of helped with the process, or?
I think if I'm being honest, I was always a novelty anyway. I was one of two Americans on board,
Oh, okay.
and I really enjoyed it. I think that most of the people there, you get into this, it's easy to fall into this trap that, oh, we're stuck here. I can't wait to get home. This is drudgery. It's just counting hours until I can get off here. But I really loved every minute of it up there. And it doesn't take long for people to pick you out. Hey, what's wrong with this guy? He seems to actually like it here. But, I find that that when you do kind of model a positive attitude, it gives people permission whom otherwise might keep it to themselves. And so I think people reacted very positively to it.
Yeah.
And this is Suchi. She's another Singaporean. She was our project engineer and basically the brains of the entire operation. She didn't come offshore often, so I wanted to make sure and get a picture of her when she came out. But she was the linchpin of the whole operation. She's absolutely fabulous. There's a Scottish fellow, Nate Smith. What a face, huh?
I mean, I don't know. From our part of the world, we all kind of get to look a bit samey. It's all Celts. Yeah, I mean, there's an element of, and I know this kind of, with the heavy industrial stuff, and you're obviously shooting very, you're using a very shallow depth of field there, obviously around, artistic choice and lighting levels and everything allowing for it.
Yeah.
But they're very movie-ish. They're kind of this guy isn't working on a rig; he's working as an actor on a set.
I made a conscious decision early on to make them all in landscape format.
Yeah.
For just that reason, I thought that the sea it just suited the kind of broad format better. And I chose for all the black and white shots are on Ilford Pan F Plus.
Paul was in with a couple of technical questions. He wants to know, were you developing and printing on board so the subjects could see them? Did they get print? So I take it this is the idea of the book, that this might go out to them.
Exactly. So that was the other thing that I got, which built with momentum throughout the project, was people would just stop me and say, when are we going to get this book? So, and it's just now coming out.
You see, I think the accidental thing about, suggesting to people that there's a finality to what you're doing, or that you have an option of an endpoint here, is that you continually get asked, you said it's finished, where is it? It's like, the book could take another 20 years,
Right. Well, that's the thing about project work, is that, when I signed on to this project in 2017, it was a 3-month project. And 3 years later, we're just finishing up. And so project work is always, it always has an end date, and that end date often slips. So you have a 3-year short-term job that is 3 months at a time. Yeah. And it has a psychological effect on people. And, and when at the end of the project, you've become very close with these people, they're like family. And then when y'all kind of scatter to the winds, it packs a punch.
I mean, there is an element of you're probably taking these knowing with some of them, this is it. You may, the usual, hey, stay in touch, but
and you hope your paths will cross again. And a lot of these guys, as you'll see as we go through these, are young guys, and they'll be around in this industry. Like this guy here, Nate, he's a crane specialist and works mostly in the North Sea, but he got roped into this project, and he's just great guy, great to be around, and you get to know him. And a lot of these guys were the age of my kids, and so it was just inevitable that I would start feeling very paternal towards them. And it was nice to get to know all these guys. And we had some women offshore as well.
Yeah.
This is Kate. She's a local Ghanaian, and she's 6 feet tall and absolutely fantastic. She was the foreman of the welding crew, so all the welders worked for Kate, and she was a tough taskmaster, but she's just a fantastic girl, and really, really liked her. Very, very good girl. And this is Kevin Connell. He's a scaffolder. These guys work harder than anyone on the vessel. Scaffolders never have a day off. Every other trade, something will come up and you'll have a day where you can't do what you're there to do. Not scaffolders. They're constantly working physically hard. And when he was young, apparently he was a very good footballer, like pro level. But when I asked him, so, how come? What are you doing here? He said that it was drugs. He wasn't shy about it. He said he had a drug problem and it cost him his football career. But he was very happy, upbeat guy. He enjoyed his work as hard as it was. He enjoyed it, and he was just great to be around.
And one of your very few action shots of somebody, I'm not suggesting all of it
because he doesn't stop.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you couldn't make him stop. Yeah. This gentleman was a representative of the Ghana National Petroleum Company, and so his role was oversight for Ghanaians to make sure that their interests were being respected offshore. And so a big job for a young guy, and he handled it very well. A couple more scaffolders, Brits, Goldie and James, just fantastic guys. And another South African, Giannis. This guy was enormous. He just lift things with one hand that I couldn't budge with help. And another local, this is one of our interns, Gifty. She was my right hand and made my job so much easier out there. I miss her very much.
And the decision to shoot a bit of color here, because I think
I couldn't avoid it. I mean, at first I thought I'd just do black and white because it's easier to process. All these, it's just simpler. There's no white balance problems or color shifts, because I really didn't know what to expect in that tropical environment. When I first started out, I thought I was going to have all kinds of condensation problems and just you name it, because it is a very harsh environment there. But surprisingly, I had no issues with either. All of the color stuff is done on Kodak Portraiture 160. Yeah. Zyke, fantastic Ghanaian.
It's remarkable to see some of your stuff in color, Jay, because I've obviously seen bits of it over the years, but to actually see like a collection of stuff here. Did this was it just, I have to do this, or did you leave after shooting a load of black and white thinking, when I come back, I'm bringing the color with me?
First trip out, I just took black and white film, and because I still was very unsure how it was all going to go, and most of the big problems that I anticipated never materialized. So I thought, well, when I come back, and then the colors are just so integral, and for me, this is essentially a memory book for my time there, and I wanted to remember it in color as well. So, and these guys, these Brits, they cannot get enough sun.
Yeah.
No amount of sun is too much sun for them. Yeah. And so they all had this kind of tan, verging on sunburn all the time.
Well, the expression "mad dogs and Englishmen,"
Yeah, I really found out what that meant on this job. So this is Andy Scott, fantastic guy, quality control. This guy's attention to detail is put Sherlock Holmes to shame. And another local, Godwin, Edom. So this guy was essentially my main point of contact with the core crew. So all of the work that we did had to go through him, and so we had a very, dynamic relationship. I was constantly on him to attend to our work, and he had his own work. But he was very good natured, and he bore it all extremely well. Giannis, I mean, Bert Albertus, this is another South African. Very stoic. When you had 2 minutes to rest, he would sit down and pull a book out of his pocket and read. A couple more of the locals.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really nice to be to get to know these people. They're extremely gracious, friendly people, and they made it a pleasure out there. I was just really shocked at how young everyone was, which I guess happens when you're my age.
I would imagine, and I'm suffering, having had a birthday last week. I think it's just that everybody apparently is getting younger.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that people are getting older; it's they're getting younger.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing about the color here is because I mean, again, the shallow depth of field side of it, I'm kind of just very much singling out the subject and making them the star of these. But I think having them in color means the background is a little bit easier to identify in terms of these are people at work. This isn't, I've just dragged, 20 random people into a studio and made it look, it's very much more of a workplace thing. And I like your artistic choice there, where it kind of gives a sense of them without without letting it kind of clutter the image. And this very much stars this
industrial panels like you see over his shoulder. They're everywhere out there, and there's just these big buttons that you can mash with your elbow if you have to, and everything is kind of oversized and super simple, and it's very functional. And yeah, it was great.
Michael, compliments coming in there from Mirren saying that they're very beautiful and very natural. So
thank you very much. It's very nice. This is Michael Glover. I could never tell if he was 40 or 70. I have any idea. I don't know how old he was, but he would run me to death. I couldn't keep up with him.
Yeah.
Another Brit. This guy was a character, man. I will miss him. So yeah, it's very bright outside. So I bring them out of their office where it's indoors, then bring them out into the African sun and say, okay, stand right there. But this one, it worked.
Yeah.
This guy was, where was he from? I don't know. He had a very, almost like Scottish accent, somewhere up in the north.
You're starting to see in that guy there the what we call the farmer's tan, which is where the neckline of the t-shirt.
Well, most of the time he had no shirt on at all. He was first one to strip down to his skivvies and get out and lay out on the deck. He was just red as a lobster the whole time. This is Alma, another government representative. Fantastic. Look at that smile. I like the pearl.
Do and there's something, because, I occasionally do a bit of this, and I know it's different because it's workplace, but I know you've kind of approached strangers in the past and something, but there's always something very, these people there's an element of trust in their eyes when they're looking at you, and I know from chatting to you here, you're somebody who puts people very much at ease. Is it a form of hypnosis? Is it just personality? How are you achieving this?
These people were so dear to me. I think they all felt it, and they were all so happy to help anything I wanted to do. And this was one of the easier things that I asked them to do. So they're probably relieved it wasn't something more difficult. And this Elvis. We had two planners that worked opposite one another on opposite shifts. This is Elvis, and the other was Prince, and I'm not making this up.
They're just fantastic.
And then we had a lot of Eastern Europeans. So the company that supplied our riggers, the guys that move everything around, they were a French company, but they had office in Serbia. And so we had tons of Serbians and Macedonians and some Croatians. And this is one of I believe Igor was from Macedonia. Like a movie star.
Yeah, I was going to say, and when he finished up his shift here, you went back to the movie set or something.
He was very shy, and he was one of the more kind of reticent of the people. It was like he did not obviously like a camera pointed at him, but these guys were so cooperative. It was a real pleasure. And this is another one. This guy is Dragon, and he was out there for a while, and he's very well. He's just exactly as he looks. And so one day, he knew I was an American, and he stopped me and he said, "Jay, did you support the bombing of Sarajevo?" And I said, "Dragan, I don't support the bombing of anything." He said, "Okay, good." He had to get it off his chest.
It's always one of those questions that you're never sure what the right answer is supposed to be. You know?
Right.
What part of the world am I in? Am I about to be beaten up?
Yeah. And this is so the company I worked for, Modec, they're a Japanese company, and so they had some of their young engineers are kind of cutting their teeth on this project, and this is one of our electrical engineers, Arai. Great guy.
Was there a unit? I mean, this is nothing to do with photography, but I'm just curious. A universal ship language, rigged language, like was it you most?
It was English. It was English.
Okay, all right.
But there was moments of controversy when people would kind of, and it's interesting because I did notice that because I was wondering how people would kind of group themselves, and it was definitely by language. So in the lunchroom, you'll see people sitting with people who speak their native language, which makes sense, you know. But most of the times, the guys who make up a crew, like these are South African guys, they'll be on a crew. So when they speak on the radio, they'll speak South African. And some of the English speakers objected to it, and they tried to get them to stop. But I always said, look, man, it's about communication first. If they understand each other better in South African or whatever language they speak, let them be. It's not that important that you hear their conversations. But otherwise, yeah, we had a lot of languages being spoken, and it was fantastic. And another South African, Martin, he was our lifting supervisor. This guy can move anything. Doesn't matter how big or oddly shaped. You can put it wherever you want it. And I think that is, no, there's more.
In terms of how you're actually shooting these, Jay, kind of one or two shots and move on, or
yeah, exactly. So yeah, so some people were kind of more available than others, and so they ended up having more options to choose from. Some people, I had one shot with them and blew it, which is sad, but I always knew that was going to be the case. I always knew that I was going to, people who I wanted to be included wouldn't be. I knew that going in, so it didn't come as much of a shock to me in the end.
I suppose this is a fundamental difference to maybe a little bit of the kind of the street portraiture, or indeed very much the portrait and studio stuff you're doing at home.
Yeah.
It's if you miss it, I think there's an element of it's a guy on the street. Well, you know.
It's a little more like event photography, like you're doing a wedding or something. You got to make sure to get the uncle who paid for the cake, you know.
Yeah. Uncle Cake.
This is AJ, a good friend of mine, very good guy. He was the senior safety specialist, tried to keep everybody's fingers intact, did a good job. Boy, talk about pressure. This guy, he never slept. So occasionally we had a accommodations barge where we all lived, except for the core crew. They lived on board the actual vessel. And occasionally I would sleep there, being kind of critical personnel. And when I did, I would share a room with AJ, and it was like not having a roommate. He was up before I woke up, and he never came back before I went to sleep. He was in his office 20 hours a day, just nonstop. Colin. This is one of our onshore engineers, so he was enjoying himself offshore. All the guys who worked onshore really envied us who got to work offshore. It's a much looser, freer environment, a lot more camaraderie. The office in town was a little more kind of typical office dynamic, and
Yeah,
they just love coming on shore.
a message in here from Eddie, and I thought the same thing myself. Are you sure it isn't Bono from U2?
I'll tell him that. This guy, he was a small guy. He was kind of had a little bit of a bend in his spine. He was extremely diabetic. He looked like a burnt matchstick.
Oh,
And I was always worried about him, his health. Like we'd go out to dinner when we'd go into town, and a lot of times he wouldn't join us if it was going to be too far. If he had some kind of a reaction, then he'd need to go to the hospital. And so one night we went in and we had dinner, and he was there, and I was glad to see him. And afterwards, he and another friend said, "Do you want to go to this bar where near where we live?" And so I said, "Sure." So we went there, and it was immediately apparent that this guy was very well known to the staff at this bar. The hostess saw him coming and went up and gave him a big hug. And we sat down at the bar, and he started ordering drinks, and he just didn't stop. He didn't stop. He nearly killed me. So we finally got out of there. I was just shocked that he was still upright. And the next day I called my friend who I was with, and I was just wrecked. And I called Murat, the Turkish fellow, and I said, "How you doing?" He said, "Well, I just got back from the hospital. My stomach was bleeding." I said, "Oh, no." I said, "Has anyone seen Colin? Is Colin okay?" So they called the office, and we said, "We just wanted to check on Colin, make sure he's okay. We had a pretty rough night last night." And he said, "No, he was here at 6. He's fine."
yeah.
Absolutely put us both nearly in our grave.
Everybody needs a friend like that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's it.
Yeah, perfect.
All right. So I have a few more folders. I have a few of the. Would anyone be interested in seeing the 14x17 stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I speaking for everybody.
Okay, well, I only brought a few examples.
You might, Jay, just because I'm a bit of a, I'm into this stuff, but you might just give people just like literally, because we're not, the ongoing joke is we don't really talk about the gear, and then I talk about gear for 10 minutes, as long as it's what I'm interested in. Welcome to dictatorships. So would you mind explaining this camera?
Okay, right. So the camera is, I call it the big box camera because that's essentially what it is. So I had, when I was still in Seattle, I had this idea that I was going to make a kind of a large format version of the Holga. It would be a 4x5 plastic camera that cost nothing, that anyone could afford, and is too simple to break. And so the kind of design I settled on was a sliding box camera, which is one of the first camera designs, even predated film cameras or plate cameras and camera obscuras. They would just have a box inside of a box that would slide to focus. And so I built a little 4x5 one out of ABS plastic sheet, and it worked great. I was like, oh, this is easy. And the idea was that you could get. I was always thinking about how I can help in some small way to secure the future of film availability. And I thought that the best thing anyone can do for that end would be to get a lot more film users. Mm. So I know that there are hundreds of millions of people emerging into the consumer class around the world, in Africa and India and Asia. And for the first time in history, these people have disposable income. And the appeal of photography is universal, especially portrait photography. Everyone wants a picture of the ones they love. It just makes us human. So the idea was to make a system that was so cheap anyone could afford it. Anyone with any disposable income could afford it. So I designed this little plastic box camera, and I figured out how to use X-ray film. I made a little processor for X-ray film because X-ray film has emulsion on both sides, and it is tragically fragile when wet. If you look at it wrong, it falls off. So you can't process it in a tray, which would be the simplest thing, the cheapest thing. but it just won't work.
It
Unless,
tends to scratch, doesn't it? It's
the only way I could develop them in trays was to put a sheet of glass in the bottom of the tray. It was perfectly smooth and filled the bottom of the tray, and then it would mostly be okay. And then I would just move the glass with the film from tray to tray to process it. And that worked okay, but it's a little bit kludgy, and I was afraid it's going to break the glass. And so I built a little slot tank developer, daylight dip and dunk kind of processor for it. But then the developer that I intended to kind of package with the whole system was Obsidian Aqua, which is basically, it's 3 ingredients, and most of the ingredients are available anywhere, and it's just absolutely cheap as chips. So this is the 14 by 17, so I thought I'd scale up my little camera into a big camera, because I found these 14 by 17 film holders on eBay for pretty cheap. Okay. And they were brand new. And I knew you could get 14 by 17 X-ray film. So I thought, aha.
I did always wonder which followed which with this.
Yeah.
No, it was, yeah.
Yeah. For me, almost everything goes back to film in some form or another. So I had this film I wanted to use, and I needed a camera for it. So I got these holders for cheap, and I got 3 of them. They were matching. And so once you have the holders and you have the film to go in them, then you can build the camera around that. And so that's what I did. So I built a scaled up version of the little sliding box camera. Didn't scale up, did not scale up. I mean, it works-ish. So that it's so much bigger. There's so much surface area on those sliding components that it racks, and it's more adjustable than focusable.
But does it lean nicely towards your, I wanted to build a super Holga kind of, it's going to be a bit crappy, but I'm happy with the results.
You're right. It's you can make it. I mean, like, I'm a big believer in the value of constraints. I think that it's natural to want to remove all of our constraints, but in the end, I think constraints define everything. They define a medium, they define your approach to things. So I embrace the constraints. So
I've been telling you
a way I could make it work. So it's adjustable. So basically, I have the positions marked on the bed. So I push it, nudge it, shove it around to about where it's supposed to be. Then I just move the whole thing forward and backward until it's in focus. And
you have a sort of a ground glass screen on the back of this then
yeah. So I had to grind a screen for it, and so the first time I ground it, the grit I used was too coarse, and so when you went to focus, it just looked like a kaleidoscope. It's just, you could barely kind of make it out. And so I had to regrind it, and that took ages, because 14 by 17 is a big chunk of glass. I worked up a sweat out there grinding that thing, but I did it as massive improvement. So.
I think at one stage I seen this process going on and thought, oh God, Jay's lost his mind.
Right, yeah. You're not alone. Yeah, I spent some moments gazing into the mirror myself.
And this is one of the images you took with this.
This is essentially me trying to determine, okay, because so most people are aware of the kind of wide angle effect for portraits. If you have a short lens, in order to fill the frame, you need to get closer to your subject, and the closer you get to your subject, the more distortion you have. So so this lens, this is a 15-inch lens on a 14 by 17 camera. So that'd be something like a 40 millimeter or 35 millimeter lens on a 35 millimeter camera. But just because of the scale, I still get more distance than you would with a 35 millimeter camera. So the distortion is there, you see it, you can start to see it coming in, obviously. But I was just trying to see how objectionable it would be to do a kind of a tight cropped head and shoulders portrait with this.
I think it's worked, Jay. I think all of the people on this call here that have you know, if I just buy my Canon L lens, for €2,000, I will finally get, that one decent portrait I've been looking for. So, I mean, for people that mightn't be, and I know there's certainly pictures of it knocking around, the camera looks like a camera that somebody has made themselves.
Yes, it does. Somebody with no skills. Yeah, it's not a pretty thing. It's a big box, but that's what a camera is, and essentially. And so, I studied briefly UX design, and there's a principle in user experience design called minimally viable product. So you sort of make something that has all the necessary features to kind of do what it's meant to do, but nothing extra. And so that's what my approach for this camera was, to see what kind of problems I'm going to face with this format, how difficult it's going to be, even if it's worth pursuing. Yeah. And so what I've learned is that, yes, it is difficult, but I've got most of the technical bits kind of in hand. And so the next camera I build will be much better. Yeah. It'll have actual bellows and focusing.
I'm really not suggesting there's anything wrong with the camera, Jay. The results very much.
There's a lot wrong with the camera, but
I believe that some of my best work has been done with a box with a hole in the front of it, no lenses. And
oh yeah, I love your pinhole stuff. Great.
So I'm a big fan of give it a try. You might show us one or two more of these, Jay, because I know people are going to want to ask you some questions as well. And despite your concerns about having nothing to talk about for an hour, we've done okay.
Right. I'm sorry, I have not been keeping track. So this is kind of the opposite end, seeing how much I could actually get into the frame in our small little garage setup. So I managed to get most of Julie in there. I think her feet are missing.
These really they're so beautiful, Jay. They're just, and there's an element here where, they could have been taken around the time of the birth of photography as well. Yeah. There's sort of a timelessness to them too.
The lens it's an old Turner Reich triple convertible from, early part of the last century, and the X-ray film is very similar to it's more advanced than like the okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Then the like tin types or wet plate, it's ortho. It's not just plain, but it's still pretty old school. Yeah. All right. So, would you like to see some more Julia?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And if we run out of time, just tell me.
Yeah. Well, I do want to give people the opportunity to ask you some questions, because I'd say they will, and then there's an element of I'm trying to be respectful of people's time as well. So, pick. I know all of these are your favorite.
Yes. So what we can do, if you like, is I can just put this on slideshow.
Yeah, perfect.
And then we can. Oh, that didn't work.
You might. I mean, one of the things that I noticed, and I see our Spanish friend has turned up here this evening as well, which is great to see him on the call. But I think maybe how I found you was Mr. Juggler was tagging some of your Belladonna developer or one of these. Like, I never quite understood this. Were these you were tweaking other people's formula to, when you were developing the likes of this X-ray film? Was this you were coming up with something because you believed there was more you could get from the film, or is this just is it obsessive kind of stuff? Or
it's a little of both. So what kind of started me on the whole developer thing was when I was first kind of starting to get serious about large format stuff. I read Gordon Hutchings' book, The Book of Pyro, and I was a member of some of online communities where they talked about this pyro stuff like it was this magic elixir that is so toxic you can't go near it, but oh my God, if you manage to use it, you will get these beautiful images. And so I was intrigued. I was wondering how much of that was just hyperbole and legend, and how much of it was actually real. And so I started kind of playing around with it. And around that same time, there was a guy a lot of you probably remember, Patrick Gaynor. Patrick Gaynor was an actual rocket scientist, worked for NASA, and he also was a photographer. And he kind of clued us all into the fact that you could use this stuff called triethanolamine as a solvent instead of water. And what that did for you is meant that you didn't need to worry about preserving. You didn't have to use a lot of sulfite to preserve your developer. As long as you kept it dry, it would basically last forever. And he published a formula called PCT, which is phenidone and ascorbic acid and T, and that was it. And I thought, man, this is genius. And the tea has just the right pH for pyrogallo. And so basically it was just a matter of doing a little bit of math and doing a couple of different variations. So at first I thought, how much ascorbic acid do you want to use? Because ascorbic acid controls how much stain you get.
Yeah.
More ascorbic acid, less stain. So you want to use enough to keep the unexposed parts clear, but no more. And so at first I thought I would use the minimum amount that I could get away with. And then I found it, depending on the film and the age of it, that it could still stain, it could fog, you get general stain. So then I went the other way. I thought, well, let's use the maximum amount we can get away with.
And
So,
at the same time, are you changing how your photography, like, is this knowing that you can pull more out of the film because of how you're going to develop it or the different developers you're using? Are you then doing, that's a stunning portrait. Are you changing how you're going to take it, knowing the developer? This idea of, Ansel Adams' idea of this, you have the score and you have the notes and all that. Are you doing the same thing? Have you pre-visualized this, knowing this, I'm going to use this insane formula that I've invented myself to do this? Or
sometimes I'll have a developer that, like the pyro developers, they have this reputation that they contain the highlights. They keep the highlights from getting away. And so sometimes they intentionally want to test that. So you get out in direct sun and you get some like deep shadows and you expose it exactly the way you shouldn't expose it. And you see if it really does live up to the hype. And it kind of does. The problem with the stuff is that it's toxic. I mean, it's not the kind of melt your skin off toxicity that I was led to believe in the beginning, but toxic is toxic. And these days I think that we can all kind of see the downside of a lot of people using something that's even a little bit toxic. So
I mean, I suppose the absolute flip side of that is the people kind of leaning towards the caffeinol. Look, I'm developing my film in red wine that I'm happy to drink.
Yeah, those guys are great. I love those guys. Yeah, these guys, they can develop film in anything. There's a guy named Daniel Keating on the Darkroom group. He develops film in everything he can find, and I think what he's found is that if you have some sodium carbonate and some ascorbic acid, you can put almost anything else in there and develop film.
I think I see tree bark or something was being used.
He uses shrubs and berries and mints and oils and all kinds of stuff.
I think for and there's a real risk of me really geeking out on this stuff, and I do, Jay, and I love the chat here, but there's also a risk of I know a huge number of people that are on the call here might be just digital only, and I certainly don't want to do kind of a film digital divide, and people know my feelings on it anyway, but it's just a thing of it's another tool, it's another arrow in the quiver, as it were.
I mean, it's an old kind of debate among us. I don't really understand why it's a debate. I mean, I shoot digital. I think most people who shoot film also shoot digital. Some people shoot digital only, because film is a commitment. But for me, it's a simple question. People ask me why I still bother with film, and it's a simple thing. It's just I like it. I like the experience of using film. I like learning a film's characteristics, loading my film holders, handling the film in the darkroom.
And,
that
and
kind
you're not. I mean, you're not set on one or two types here. You will kind of lean in and experiment with things. And
I really, I'm a very curious person by nature, and I want to know everything. So yeah, I love digital. Digital is just as interesting as it is. It's more interesting to me theoretically than practically. The experience of shooting digital is a little bit impoverished for me compared to using film. Um, every time I do it, I think, my God, this is so much easier. Why don't I do this? Look at this. You know right away if you've messed something up,
yeah, yeah.
which I have, inevitably. But no,
But I mean, there is an element for me anyway that, sometimes not knowing you've messed it up until it's finished.
yeah, yeah,
You would have missed out on
right,
an hour's fun in the dark room and all of this, as frustrating as it can be. But
yeah. Oh,
it's
it is.
not
Yeah, it is.
not always the what do they call it? It's not always the destination; it's the journey.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so that's for me. I'm much more kind of focused on the experience of using film and all of these weird printing techniques. I just love that stuff. I love the chemistry and playing around with it, and using your hands and getting in a dark room. It's very romantic, and I just, since I was a kid, I learned to do this when I was 13 or something, and
Yeah.
it made a mark. And when you're that age, something like close to magic, it makes a mark on you. And I think that for
Absolutely. I think Paul earlier on in the chat there made kind of the comment about the digital side of things being very sort of the instant gratification of it might necessarily be, the greatest thing in the world, but it certainly allows for
yeah, and the results that people get with digital cameras are absolutely fantastic. They're beautiful, beautiful works of art. There's nothing to there's nothing to say that digital. I will not be drawn into the argument that digital is somehow inferior to film.
yeah, absolutely,
I
yeah.
don't believe that.
Yeah. No, I mean, there could be a snobbery around it as well, and I like to kind of come back to it here that it's the image that really is the important thing. But I think there might be an element here of kind of what you're cooking up, and obviously your subject matter here is something that's very close to your heart. In case people haven't realised it yet, this is Jay's wife.
Yeah, these are all Julia, and she is, she's just, uh, you know, I think a lot about photography, but for me, photography is portrait photography.
Yeah.
The rest of it is sort of outside my field of vision. I don't really even think about it that much.
Yeah, as we do more of these things, we have people that are kind of known for their landscape kind of stuff, and they'll say the exact opposite, that
Yeah,
it's
yeah, absolutely.
hold no interest to me.
Yeah, and I totally get it. I get how people can be drawn to that. I understand it completely. I appreciate it. It's just not me.
Yeah, yeah.
For me, I had a weird childhood. I grew up. My family was always moving. We moved every year on average, and so by the time I graduated high school, I'd gone to 13 different schools.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So my whole life has been a series of making and losing friends, and I think that part of what draws me to portrait photography is this idea that you can take something with you, that you can keep something, and like that offshore project. I wish that I had a similar book for every one of those chapters in my life,
Yeah.
But for me, portrait photography is the philosophical center of my life. I mean, you think about portrait photography, for me, it has everything to do with time and memory and identity, and I never get enough of it. I can never quite get to where I want to be. It's a constant. Oh, this is.
But it's such a wonderful thing to keep striving for, Jay, because you're certainly doing very well at it. It's. I think you're achieving it. And I like the idea that you've kind of taken it on as a kind of a philosophical stance in your life. I think that's.
It is. You can kind of approach the universe through any kind of channel. Doesn't matter what it is really. And for me, it's portrait photography, and it really just, I never get tired of it.
Jay, I just conscious of the time, and I want to give people if you don't mind, a couple of minutes to maybe ask you a few questions, if that's okay. So if you want to stop sharing your screen, and I'll do the gallery view here.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Perfect. Okay. Now I'm going to unmute everybody. If you don't want to be, if you don't want to be unmuted, please mute yourself again, and we see how this goes. And this has worked reasonably well the last few times. So I think you should have the ability to unmute yourself now if you want to ask a question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Marty, go ahead.
All right, no, I'm just testing here.
All right.
Jay, hi,
Good
Jay.
question, Marty. Yes, Jay, you here, Marty.
I'm only getting used to this Zoom thing.
Hi, Jay.
Hello.
First of all, congratulations. These are actually superb. I
Oh,
wanted to ask you, the book you're doing, are you going to make it available to people outside of the workplace, or just as a private?
Well, yeah. So the idea was that originally I was going to make this book. It was going to be, 12 pages, and I would print them off and hand them out to everybody. But it swelled up, so ended up being 158 portraits, and so I've got them. They're printing the first kind of book now to proof it. So when I get it, and if everything looks okay, then I will make it available to everyone. Anyone who wants it can obviously purchase one. But I don't know. I'm flattered that you would even ask.
And the fact that you're surprised is remarkable, Jay. I mean, I don't know. I can't keep doing this, Jay. You're great.
Can I just ask what focal length you use? Because I missed the beginning of the meet.
Oh, for the offshore stuff?
Yeah.
That was a 50 1.4.
1.4.
Yeah, my idea was that I would take a camera out there that if it was destroyed or lost, I could replace it for $100. I wouldn't cry any tears over it. So yeah, the old SRT 101 and a 50 1.4, and served me well. Never let me down. I dropped it on the stairs once, the metal stairs. It was fine.
Was the stairs okay?
Stairs was damaged.
Mirren has a question for you there, Jay, if you don't mind. No, we can't hear you, Mirren. Sorry. No. We'll come back to you, Mirren. I think there's a problem with your microphone. Or if you want to type it in the chat, Mirren, I'll ask it for you.
I just would like to thank Jay for sharing all his knowledge to all of us.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Jay. I am really astonished of the work that you have done with developers, basically. Of course, I envy you a lot for your wonderful portraits. I never have been a portrait photographer. I am so shy to ask people to sit in front of mine.
Yes. It's nice if you have a wife who's cooperative.
Yeah, you are lucky with that.
Yes, I am.
In the next days, I will try to write you a little bit about developers. I have some small questions for you, but I think this is not the moment nor the place. So,
or anytime it's just.
I think it would end up with maybe 3 or 4 of us still here, and everybody else would leave. And of course, when you have guys whose backgrounds have chemistry and everything else, it gets very complicated very quickly. So, anybody else there want to?
Are you working on anything else, Jay, at the moment regarding portrait projects?
Well, like I said, I'm essentially in quarantine, so.
You can go into the other room. I have your phone and go to your cell.
So I'm working with Juliet as much as I can.
Okay.
And with my my daughter and her family live here, and they're my other options. So.
We did have a bit of a chat about this, not to kind of kick into it again, but Jay had been doing sort of a series of portraits of kind of strangers in the street and this type of thing. And
I missed some of it because I was on the phone. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, this was offline start of COVID kind of stuff. But I think it was a very interesting thing, Jay, for somebody who happily approaches people. You were sort of speaking about the difficulty that, you know, I don't particularly want to go into the pandemic thing, but we can't really ignore the elephant in the room either, because that kind of knocked that on the head for you as well, didn't it?
Yeah, I had this idea at the beginning of the pandemic, you know, when they were laying out the ground rules for safe distances. And I thought, well, I'll go out and I'll do a series of portraits of people from a safe distance, just so people have an idea what that looks like. And so I took my camera and I went out and I walked around like I often do. And whenever I would see somebody, they would move to the other side of the street, you know. And so it became clear very, very quickly that was not a viable project.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Just one thing, can I ask something, Brandon?
Of course you can, Eddie, go ahead.
Just Jay at the start was saying over his great love of film and photography, and one of the reasons he did it was obviously to keep film alive. But I saw one of these videos that go around online, and it was all these guys and girls, and they're all talking about how great film was and how they enjoyed it and everything. And then the last guy on the video kind of said, film, it's not sustainable because it's so environmentally damaging. And, you know, it was kind of the end of the video. And I kind of says, Jesus, when you think about it, it is, you know, it's quite destructive. It's quite damaging.
Yeah.
And
This is going to be 1 minute.
That's
Just
why
one.
What do you think, Jay? You know, it is destructive. It is damaging. You know, where do we go? How can we use film without damaging the environment?
That's a good question, Eddie. And before I attempt to answer a question that's way over my head, I want to say thank you, Eddie. And your program here with Brendan was the first one I saw. Absolutely loved it. Beautiful stuff. Beautiful, inspirational stuff. As far as the environmental impact of film, I think that as consumers, everything we use has a footprint. As artists, I think that it's natural to think of art as nice to have instead of a need to have. And I think that it's reasonable to ask if there's another way to achieve your goals artistically that are less damaging to the environment. I don't have any answers to these questions, but I am sensitive to them.
I think that, you know, there's a Rolleiflex made in the 1930s that's in weekly usage.
Beautiful.
I've had 2 or 3 digital cameras since I started shooting digitally. Now, what you know, yes, maybe the film and the chemistry and stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah,
there's difficulties around that, but like, you know, I'm not going to throw this out. It's still taking the same film that's been produced for years. You know, like you know, I'm not going to say I'm the world's greatest environmentalist. That's for other people to say. But you know, I think there is an element where it is sustainable. You know, within, you know.
There is nothing sustainable. Nothing. We are more people than the world can support. That's the main point. I mean, if you think in the chemistry of photography, you have to think in the chemistry of the washing machine, or in the chemistry of making batteries for cars, or in the chemistry of making everything. Everything is chemistry in the end.
I think the chemistry of photography is a very minor issue. The developers that we use, the developer I've been using most recently is iCore. It's another one of my kind of attempts to find the perfect developer, and it's essentially non-toxic. And the other chemicals, the fixer, once you remove the silver out of the fixer, it's essentially fertilizer. So I'm not concerned with the chemistry, especially considering the small number of film users in the, around the world compared to all the other things we consume. It's a small issue, but the manufacture of film is a different issue. Now they don't use the animal gelatin that they used to use. It's a synthetic product now. I mean, there may be some minor producers somewhere in the world who use animal gelatin, but for the most part, that's not an issue. So I'm glad to see that. But you know, this is all way over my head. I do think about it, but I haven't gotten to the point where I think this is too damaging to the environment for me to conscionably pursue. If I do come to that conclusion, I'll take up painting.
I am enjoying the fact that we skirted around the American elections, the global pandemic, and Jesus successfully introduced other existential.
Actually, my microphone is working now. I hope I can ask a question.
Okay,
Sorry, I had some technical issues before. So my question is about lighting.
Okay.
I've been reading some articles about the importance of lighting, and looking at your pictures, I believe that you are using what we call hard light. That is kind of what we call hard light.
A lot of times I do, yeah. I mean, I'd say a large percentage of my portraits are made with one light, usually a 28-inch beauty dish. I have more at my disposal now than I did in the past, and so I'm trying out some other things. I have some soft boxes. I use a lot of natural light as well, windows, and I'd say it's probably 50-50 natural light and studio light. So
which do you prefer to work with, the natural light or the artificial?
I'm sorry?
That was do you prefer the natural light or the artificial light?
What do I prefer? Oh, neither. I think that they both have big advantages. I mean, sometimes you'll go to a place and you'll find this light that is just, you know, it's just beaming straight down from heaven, and it's just beautiful and perfect. Other times you struggle to find a safe harbor from the direct light. My favorite place to shoot in available light is in the city. There's so many light modifiers. That's what I see cities as, basically, as giant light modifiers. There's always reflections and shadows and varieties of backgrounds and texture. I love shooting in the city in available light. It's the best.
In Ireland, we use nature's softbox, which is just constant cloud coverage. So it's
And another question I wanted to ask you is that obviously all these photographs were taken prior to the coronavirus lockdown, or have you been taking pictures? Like, for example, I'm from Spain, and in Spain, you can't be in Spain without a mask. You have to have the mask all the time. I don't know how you are in Illinois, correct? Where are you in the US? So I don't know what the situation is. In Ireland, masks are not compulsory outdoors. It means that some people wear masks, some people don't. My question is, have you been doing any projects since the lockdown in terms of taking portraits?
No, just with my immediate family, the people who are quarantined with me.
Okay. And would you not be feeling comfortable about this, or I don't know?
I wouldn't ask somebody to expose themselves for a portrait. I mean, that's the kind of exposure that's a little bit too on the nose.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have we anyone else there before?
Did you ever hear of a photographer called Jane Brown who used quite a lot of natural light?
Absolutely beautiful. Yeah. A big inspiration. Jane Bone was a big inspiration for my offshore portraits. I was given a book of her portraits, and in reading about her and looking at these portraits, most of her most famous shots were shot with 35mm cameras with a normal lens.
The Samuel Beckett ones are her favorite, famous ones, I think.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought her up, because yes, a very direct influence on me.
That's good to hear.
As usual, guys, if there's anybody you want to stick links up to that other people can maybe find these photographers afterwards, that's always appreciated. I want to be respectful of people's times. I would have similar to other talks here, I could go on forever with this. I'm not going to, and you'll all be grateful. As disappointing as the next 1 minute of your life is going to be, you'll be happier it ended. So Jay, thank you so much. It was very nice to have a chat with you. Thank you for being generous with your time and sharing your beautiful portraiture. Like I say, I would speak to you for hours. I would look at these forever.
Well, thank you very much. I
What
appreciate the generous invitation. very
so
much.
stay safe, stay well, and I'll talk to you again. And for everybody else, thank you so much for joining me again and indulging these little discussions. So thank you so much. If you have questions, and I know not everybody likes to talk on the video or have their voice come out on it, you can ask them, connect with Jay, or I'll ask Jay for you, and we'll pass questions around, because I know not everybody's comfortable with that, but please feel free to kind of reach out. Until the next time, guys, and before you ask, Mirren, maybe in about a month.
Thanks very much, Jay.
Thank you all.
Okay, thanks, Jay. That was
Thanks,
great.
Jay. That was fantastic.
It was
Thank
really nice. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you. Bye.
See you in December, guys. Bye.
See you soon, Mirren. Bye.
Good night.